Raider Nation, what's good? Welcome into the Silver and Black Sports Network podcast. I'm Jesse Merrick here. On today's show, we're going to be talking a lot about the defense. It was a solid day for them at practice for sure. Now, in particular, Devin White, he was flashing. Big day for him. We're also diving into one corner who seems to have thrown his name into the mix for a role opposite of Eric Stokes. A lot of moving and shaking back there. We'll also talk some D-line as Adam Butler returned to the lineup, and there's one running back who's kind of actually jumping up the depth chart, going to make for some really tough decisions. All that and more coming your way on the Silver and Black Sports Network podcast. So with that, let's get it rolling. All right, guys, real quick before we get things going, if you aren't already subscribed to our newsletter, go to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and get that bad boy delivered right to your inbox every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. That's got even more nuggets from practice, and it's a much deeper analysis from me as well. A lot more organized thoughts. But first up on today's show, our daily Jackson Powers-Johnson update. He was back with the ones and was a full participant in practice. This after he missed some time in their previous practice as he was dealing with a sore rib. Pete said he got punched. I had somebody asking about that whole thing. I think it was just like an issue in practice or in a drill or something like that. I don't think it was anything like someone mentioned the fact that Max had gotten into a bit of a scuffle at practice one day. Max did not punch him as far as I know. Like, that's not a thing. But, I think he just took a blow, to the ribs and was, hurting a little bit. But he was back after it at practice, full participant from everything I saw, and was working with the ones at right guard. Still no Alex Kappa. He's now missed 3 days of practice with a rib issue of his own. Pete said they're, still kind of working through it. Might be a cracked rib or something like that. Those things just take time, and especially as an offensive lineman where you're getting collision like that all the time, that's not a fun one to have to deal with. So they're really moving slowly with him. Again, going to be real curious to see how that rotation looks when Kappa is healthy. At that point, has Jackson Powers-Johnson shown them everything they need by the time he's able to come back? Or is it a true competition again, and do we see them rotating in? I think that will probably be the case, but as I've said multiple times, I think JPJ ends up being the starter at right guard when it's all said and done. But anyway, let's talk some defense now. Devin White, he stole the show at practice today. He had 2 interceptions out there. He's got 3 picks to his career, but he's come down with a handful of them in practice so far. And obviously practice is different than the games, but the guy has been looking pretty good in practice on a handful of days. He's been real streaky. Our guy Q Myers noted that when we were watching practice together, and he's like, look, when this guy is on it, he is on it, and he's making plays. When he's not, you don't really see a whole lot from him, but that's definitely the case with him, and I've been really impressed with what I've seen from him in coverage in a lot of stretches there, and the physicality has been there, at the point of the catch, coming in and collisioning guys and taking them down. Obviously, we need to see it more in the run game from him, but it's promising what he's shown so far. He looks like he's flying around. He mentioned that Jamal Adams is in there really making him and other guys in that linebacker room sweat, and so I think it's pushed him, So so far, the practices for him have been solid. He's been putting good things on tape overall. Now we obviously just need to see it in the game because, look, he and the rest of that defense struggled to stop the run. So that's something fans and you guys at home, I know, are really going to be watching as it pertains to him, but definitely a big day for him. Again, coming away with 2 picks. I believe both of them were off of Geno. I know the first one was for sure. The second pick actually bounced off of somebody's helmet, and he just kind of had his head on a swivel and managed to run down and get a hold of that thing. So that was a good play of just kind of like being aware of what's going on and everything like that. So solid day by him. Another guy who had a nice little day for himself was Kyu Blu Kelly. Yeah, he mixed in with the first team defense opposite of Eric Stokes. He was rotating in with rookie Darian Porter. Now, DCAM was actually working with the 2s. So he's actually entering his 3rd year in the league, and he only played in 6 games so far in his career, and he has been cut by Pete Carroll, but he easily came down with the play of the day when he got his opportunity working with the ones. They were running a route, and he just is sitting there in that zone and just broke on that bad boy, jumps up, high points it. I could sit here and talk about it, but I think it's much better if we hear about the play of the day for him. I asked him to kind of take us through that, and I always love hearing the player's perspective of how the play's developed.
He ran like a post corner. I was on top, and I was able to key through him to the quarterback. And then once I saw it come out, it was just a fight for the ball. And at that point, just, make the play.
So, hey, solid day for him. Again, taking advantage of those reps that he's getting with the ones. I think the staff is really mixing a lot of guys in wholesale, offense, defense, you name it, getting a lot of data to be able to pull from and really diving into the evaluation this week in particular, especially with the 49ers coming to town. But today really felt like one of those days where they're trying to get as much eval as possible with a lot of different guys. I think that's why Kyu gets repped in there with the ones. And again, looked good, comes through with that flashy play. And again, it was one hell of a play to be able to get that down. So real curious to see how the battle develops. Again, DCAM has mostly been that guy in the mix. Another one where I again thinks that the intrigue maybe gets taken away, because I do think that Darian Porter ends up being the starter there. We did see him in one-on-ones, got beat by Trey Tucker, but was beat on the comeback, but showed really good recovery speed to get back in there and rip it away from him, as if they both went up for a contested catch. So, that guy, again, very much still learning the position, but has all the athleticism in the world for it and has looked, really comfortable on many different occasions going against some tough covers in practice. So, I don't see him getting unseated, but for Kyu to get some reps with the ones, that's big, and to be able to come away with a big play like that, obviously the coaching staff is going to take notice of that. But let's stick with the DBs. We did get our first look at Terrell Edmonds, the new safety for the Raiders. He rocking the number 48. And he did work with the second unit today. I didn't expect him to come in and start working with the ones. That would have been crazy, right out of the gates. But he is competing to be the first safety off the bench in that big nickel package, which, again, is something I think that the Raiders are going to be going to a lot. And that's why I say working with the ones, because I look at that big nickel package as almost kind of a base package for them. So they'll have two safeties on the field there. I've dove into it a bunch, so I don't want to beat the dead horse here on this thing. But that is when Chin rolls up into the slot, and then they bring a number 2 safety to be up there next to Isaiah Polamalu, So I think he's going to come in and compete for that spot. So far, it has been Chris Smith II that's had that first crack at it. Thomas Harper's also been in the mix. The only thing is both of those guys are 5'10" and under 200 pounds. So they obviously don't fit the frame and the mold that Pete and this staff in their DBs. Whereas Edmonds comes in, he's 6'1", 217, runs a 4.4. He is a very willing tackler. He will fly in there and hit guys. We've seen that throughout his career. Obviously, coverage is the iffy thing, and as a safety, you want to be, locked in that regard. But he comes in as an interesting piece back there when they do move to that big nickel. So I'm curious to see how long he's working with the twos, if and when maybe he works himself into the mix there for that competition. But so far, Chris Smith seems to be the guy in the lead for that spot that Lonnie Johnson vacated after he got hurt. But I would say, with Edmonds, he's actually coming in with the right mindset. He talked today about diving in at this stage. We're 3 weeks into camp, trying to wrap your head around this defense and hit the ground running so that he can come in and compete right off the start to get in there and get some reps with the ones. And he noted that it's a process, but he's taking the right mindset and the right approach to diving into this thing.
Just be coachable, number one. Don't be afraid to ask the question. Don't be afraid to ask a teammate when you're out there with them. Just go out there and just give everything you got. Just come in here, try to be a stay rat, you can say. Just stay in the building. Nothing for me to do at the hotel anyway, so stay in the building and just learn as much as I can and come and help out whenever they put me in.
Yeah, it is pretty funny. These guys, all they have to do right now is ball. He noted, what am I going to do? Just, chill in the hotel room? So he said he's going to be spending a ton of time at the facility. Could be sleeping there, but really cool to see. You love to see a new guy coming in and embracing it. And he's talked a lot about Pete and just the vibe around the group and everything like that. And that's something that every guy that's come in has really spoken about. We'll touch on more of that today because I thought Colin Johnson had a really good soundbite talking about Pete and the difference that he's made with this team. We've talked about it so much and it becomes almost cliche, so that's why I want to do it at the end. But it's a really good soundbite, where he talks about just the energy that he brings on a daily basis to the entire team. But again, Edmonds is one guy that is a very interesting piece to watch going forward. Now, sticking with the defense, again, I told you guys we're going to be talking a ton about the defense. It was a good day for them overall. Not that it was a horrible day for the offense by any means, but they really stood out, and there was a lot of interesting things that kind of developed on defense. One of those things was Adam Butler coming back after he was dealing with a family matter, and obviously so happy that he's able to be back. Hopefully all that was handled as best as it possibly could be. You always have your heart out for guys whenever they're dealing with stuff like that. But for him coming back now, we did see a lot of interesting looks along that defensive line. Saw some five-man groups, five-man fronts that the Raiders were running with Max, Malcolm Kuntz, Adam Butler is the nose tackle, Thomas Booker, and Jonah Laulu both as other tackles in there as well. That's a real big group there. You'll remember with Thomas Booker, he's a 300-pound guy, but a very athletic 300-pound guy. So he can slide around all over the place. Jonah Laulu as well is another guy that has played tackle, has played edge, all these different things. So he moves around a lot too. Tonka Hemingway was another guy that's in there getting looks, and another dude who can move around all over that defensive line. Again, as I talked about, earlier, I think the staff really is gathering a ton of intel. I asked Pete about Tonka the other day, and we talked about it on the podcast. He said, we're just trying to get as many reps as we can so we can figure out like what he is. I think that's what they're doing with a lot of different guys. And basically what I'm getting at here with the defensive front, what was so interesting to me is there are a lot of different looks that these guys can throw out here. And again, they're still in the stage of evaluating and doing all of those things as coaches. But having said that, we've heard so many times over the years with Patrick Graham, because he's been the constant, on this team as a defensive coordinator, he's talked about wanting to be able to rush in waves. Right now, they have a lot of guys they can rotate through in there. Now, how effective will they be? We're going to have to wait till the season to see that. But there are a lot of pieces that do provide interesting looks, that provide positional versatility all along that defensive line. That's something that's really stuck out to me. And at the end of the day, like, the name of the game is rush and cover. And that's what the Raiders are trying to do up front. They're trying to get home with the rush. And on the back end, they're hoping a guy like Darian Porter and some of the other young guys back there can be lockdown corners for them, And if they can do that, obviously, it will be a total game changer for this group. Another thing, though, that is yet to be determined. But having said that, I think we're going to see so many different looks up front for this team. They're going to be able to rotate guys through, move these bodies all over the place. We've talked about how we've seen Tyree Wilson also getting work outside and inside. So there's tons of bodies that can rotate through. And I don't quite want to call a defensive lineman a positionless player, but we've talked about that a lot. We mentioned that Chip Kelly mentioned it, talking about a guy like a Jamal Adams, who is a bit of that positionless type player. Well, they've got some guys that are, I guess, maybe positionless D linemen, we can call them. Even a guy like Kuntz, he can stand up and rush from the outside, and put his hand in the dirt too. But then also the fact that you've got those guys in Laulu, in Booker, in Tyree, all of them that can like slide around. Again, just need to see them be able to do that effectively. A lot of unknowns there, in particular with Tyree and Laulu, as obviously we've seen it the last couple of years as Tyree tries to kind of turn that corner. I think he's just always going to be a rotational guy, whereas Laulu is a guy that Max was talking up, and I think he's kind of starting to come into his own a little bit, and this will be a big year for him and showing the world what he could do, and it's a big opportunity for him. But then they go and bring in Booker, another guy who was a fast riser. He mentioned it, that he went from being cut, initially early on in his career, to now being a guy that was traded for. So very much so the Raiders coveted his skill set, and so they thought he was good enough to be able to trade for him. So now he's coming in, and he's in the mix as well. So just a bunch of bodies rotating through on the D-line, and it is going to be interesting to see what the usage of that group looks like, not only on Thursday when they do have the joint practice with the 49ers, but also in the game itself. Pete said a lot of the guys are going to play a lot, particularly the starters. So I'm curious to see what the rotation looks like in probably the first quarter of that game with a bunch of them. I mentioned lots of defense today. We do have a little bit to talk about with the offense, and I want to talk about the whole running back room. It's an interesting group. There's going to be a lot of really tough decisions to be made. I mentioned one back that's rising up the depth chart. I think Dylan Lobby is that guy. Again, they're rotating dudes through, but he now is having a good showing in Seattle and is coming off of that, and he's been a motor guy, so he actually started getting some reps with the twos today. That was something that I don't think I've seen so far throughout camp, so the coaching staff very clearly taking notice of the work that he put in that game, and now giving him more opportunities, again, to be able to get a better look at him and see how he reacts with maybe some better players around him or some more experienced guys. So like I said, he was working with the twos, but my big thing is when you go and look through it, obviously Genty is a lock. He's not going anywhere. I do think that Zamir White is a lock as well. We've talked about the fact that he looks very different, looks lighter, looks faster, looks more explosive. But then there's Raheem Mostert who comes in, who's a guy that I personally like. Again, I've said it. He's not that far removed from leading the league in touchdowns. We know he's had injury concerns over the years. And, yes, I know they had he and his wife had a baby, and so he was away from the team for a while too. So he missed out on some time with them. I'm not trying to hold that against him, but, was away from the team for a little bit there. So I do wonder, because in my mind, I think Mostert's safe. But I've had the conversation with a couple folks over there, a couple media members. We're wondering, is he safe? Purely because you need to look after Genty and Zeus, and Zeus is involved on special teams too, but you need to look at what these guys are going to give you at the bottom of that depth chart in the running back room, what they're going to give you on special teams, and what that usage will look like. With the new kickoff rule, obviously special teams players, specifically on kickoff and kick return, bring a different value to the table. And Dylan Laube is a guy who's involved in a lot of different special teams on kickoff, kick return, all of those things, you know. And so he's a guy that's very interesting because, again, when he got the opportunity in the game, he looked good. He scores the touchdown. He's involved in a lot of different things. And then he goes and follows it up with a nice tackle on kickoff as well, pinning the Seahawks deep there too. So he's a guy that the more work he's gotten, the better he's looked. He's taking advantage of those opportunities. You know, Pete's been impressed with them. And then there's also Chris Collier, another guy who I even saw today split out at receiver too, which Laube has some of that in him too. He's got that, you know, scat back type of stuff that he can do. But Collier is another dude that looks very big in his pads and runs very much so behind them, but can do a bunch of things, can be split out, has froze a lot of guys, you know, in pass cover, or in when he's caught the ball, he's froze some guys, sticking the foot in the ground, hitting him with the jukes and stuff like that. I've been impressed with Chris as well. So I think you sit there and you wonder, okay, between Laube and Chris Collier, like, what's going to happen? And then Sincere McCormick is another guy we can't forget about, who I thought he was going to be able to, you know, prove and show them, hey, I'm the guy. But now it almost seems like, okay, maybe Laube and Collier are kind of elevating above him now, you know? And then you have to figure out who you can actually fit onto your practice squad and all those things. And I don't know if Laube makes it on the practice squad if they get rid of him. And that's all those games that Spytek and Pete and the staff as a whole have to play and ask themselves. So all this to say, that's just something I'm going to be watching going forward, obviously in this next preseason game, but throughout practice. The usage of the running backs behind Genty, Zeus, and obviously Mostert too. Like I said, I'm not writing the guy off, but it is just interesting because I wonder, you know, he's a vet, all these things, but I wonder if he's safe. I'll be honest, I haven't paid attention a ton to where he's been out on special teams. I don't think he's heavily involved in there. Could totally be wrong on that front, and I need to start paying attention more to where he's at on special teams. But guys like Chris Collier, Sincere McCormick, and Dylan Laube just pop more on special teams because they're involved in so much of it. But again, for me, some homework, follow around what Raheem Mostert's doing, during those special teams drills. I'm going to be keeping an eye out for that. But very interesting stuff with Laube, and again, Chris Collier too. And I'm wondering what's going on with Sincere McCormick, what happens with him in this upcoming game, and what kind of workload he gets. Because again, I think he's another guy that at the bottom of your depth chart brings a lot of things to the table. But I think right now, if it were me, I think Laube's a guy that's probably got the lead among those three dudes. You know, it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. A lot of tough decisions coming their way. That is for sure. And also, guys, one of the things that we do want to talk about is Pete Carroll. Like, we've talked about the energy and everything that he does bring to the table, you know, for this team. And it's so cliche to talk about it, and he hates talking about his age, and I'm kind of over that whole thing too. But it is wild every time you see him. Like, he really does just bring the juice every day. Today at practice, he ran by all of us media folks and everything. He was like fist pumping everybody, and he's like, hey, we need some good pub today. We need some good pub today. And like, you know, look, like, we're unbiased sources here. We're just sitting back observing and reporting and doing those things. But like, you know, it's hard not to appreciate a guy like Pete that has that kind of energy and brings it to practice every single day. Like, it's fun for me to watch as a media member, to sit back and think like, hey man, we're watching a guy that I grew up watching at USC, and that has done so many great things in the NFL and really at every level that he's been at. Seeing him come to work and bring that passion and intensity every day, it really is off the charts. And like, we can't talk about it enough because it's different than the previous coaches before. AP obviously brought the juice and the respect that a former player brings, but he didn't have the resume that Pete does. Josh McDaniels, obviously that whole thing was a weird situation, and that whole thing just blew up. Whereas Pete, you know, is the adult in the room, brings the energy, is very much a player's coach, and it's clear that guys love coming to work for him every single day. And today we talked to Colin Johnson, the fifth-year receiver out of Texas. He's another big body in that receiving room, and I thought he had some really great comments about what Pete brings to this team in terms of that energy and the vibe and all those things. Whereas, like, some people outside the building might think, like, oh, a lot of these, like, compete, come Pete, spelled out with the Pete in there, are corny and things like that. But for these guys in the building, and even for me as a media member, like, it's not, because it's genuine to Pete. And so here's Colin's take on just what Pete brings to him and kind of a peek behind the curtain of what it's like inside the facility, in the meal room and all that stuff. I thought it was really interesting.
I've never seen this amount of energy each and every day in everything, not just practice. I'm talking about, eating breakfast and Coach Carroll's like hopping in with excitement, or team meetings. People are standing and clapping when Pete Carroll's walking down the stairs and music's playing and we're shooting hoops. And the energy is just contagious, and it's something that I feel like a lot of us really just enjoy coming to work and enjoy the process of getting better. So compete is kind of our team's motto, and it's very fitting with Coach Pete Carroll, right? So it's just everything. I feel like the stars are aligning, and we're just getting better every day. But I have extreme faith in this group of guys and the leadership of Coach Carroll.
So see, look, like it's very clear the energy in that building is just different than it's been. You even hear Michael Mayer talking about it a couple weeks ago when we spoke to him about how like Pete is in it with you each and every day. And what we see at practice is only just a sliver of everything. So like he's bringing it 24/7, 365 with these guys behind closed doors. And I personally think that's really cool. And you like seeing these guys that we cover and talk to on a daily basis just excited about going to work. And every guy, when they step up to the mic, when you ask them about Pete, like it's a genuine excitement to talk about what he brings to the table. And we'll have to see if that translates to wins on the field, but it can't be a bad thing, So I think that's a win for the Raiders with where they're at in terms of just the vibes around the team and everything like that. Everybody seems happy to come to work and compete. And competition at the end of the day is a really solid thing to be, instilling in your team, and they're running with it. So it's been fun to watch for sure. But anyway, guys, that is going to do it for our show today. The Raiders are back at it for practice tomorrow, so make sure you keep an eye out for our next podcast after that. That's their last day of practice before the joint practices with the 49ers, which is going to be a big day. But also, we've got our next newsletter coming out Wednesday morning. Yeah, so make sure you're tuning in for that. That's going to come out before practice, so look out for that, because if you're not already subscribed to it, you do need to get subscribed to it. That's, again, the thing that comes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m., goes right to your inbox, has all the nuggets and the takeaways from practice. In order to subscribe to that, go to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com. Again, that's silverandblacksportsnetwork.com. That's actually one of the best ways you can help support this podcast, obviously by subscribing and doing all those things. But that newsletter is kind of the lifeblood of what we do. It's one of the foundations of it, along with this podcast. So go check it out on silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and subscribe. We have a lot of fun, with that newsletter and putting things together and, trying to just have a good time with it. You got the play of the day from practice, a deeper dive into some more of the takeaways as well. So do check that out. And again, make sure you guys continue to like and subscribe to this podcast wherever it is that you are listening to us. If you like what you heard, please do hit us with the 5-star reviews as well and leave a comment too. Those things are a huge help for all of us. And again, sharing's caring, so make sure you send them to your friends. Get everybody involved. Let's continue to grow this community and make it something really cool to help us to continue to pump out this content and bring it to more and more Raiders fans to help and grow the brand. But anyway, guys, with that, we do appreciate you listening and watching, and we will catch you after practice on Wednesday.